Name is Jupiter Rueda de Leon. I used to go by the stage name Aeileon, spelled Aeileon, and I first became a national recording artist on Busy Bones' 2007 album entitled Trials and Tribulations. My story starts with my parents who met in Mexico. My father met my mother on a bus in Mexico. She was a runaway at the time. She ran away because my grandmother's boyfriend was molesting her, and she tried to let my grandmother know what was going on, but my grandmother didn't believe her. So she ran away, and my dad met her on a bus. He gave her a place to live, and they eventually began dating, and she became pregnant with my sister. After she became pregnant, my father and her got married. My grandmother, my mother's mother, found out about it and took my mother to Miami, Florida. So my mother was writing my dad, letting him know where they were at, and he found her by the address on the envelope, visited her, and they continued their relationship against my grandmother's wishes. And then my mother became pregnant with me, and my grandmother wanted my mom to have an abortion. But then my grandmother found out that she was also pregnant, and she was pregnant with a boy as well. So she couldn't really push the issue of trying to get my mother to have an abortion. So my uncle is actually a day younger than me, because my grandmother and my mother both gave birth in the same hospital, just in 2 rooms away from each other. My grandmother was in one room, and my mother was in another room. So after I was born, my grandmother was still trying to get my mother to leave my dad, and she was trying to get her to date drug dealers and drug kingpins. My dad was against it. There was some type of argument, and they split up. My dad took me and came to Zanesville, Ohio, and started dating a lady named Roxanne, and had a son with her named Chaz. My mother left with my grandmother back to Mexico, and my uncles on my father's side tracked my mother down years later and kidnapped my sister from my mother. They called my dad, and my dad flew to Mexico, picked up my sister, and brought her back to Zanesville, Ohio. So I didn't meet my sister until I was like 5 or 6 years old. So I was kidnapped. My sister and I were both kidnapped from my mother. My dad pretty much kept it a secret because we were kids. We really didn't know what was going on, but we did always ask about our mother, and he would never tell us anything. And one time my sister found a shoebox under his bed with pictures of our mother in it, and she knew that was our mother because she spent more time with her than I did. And my dad found out, and we got in trouble, and we never seen those pictures again. I ended up having a dream probably like 20 years later, 25 years later, somewhere around that time, and about 20 years later, and in a dream I seen a heavy-set lady with no hair standing in front of the TV, and I was trying to change the channel, and she said, "Get up and find your mom," and I'm like, "I don't have a mom," and she kicked me in my shin, and I woke up, and my shin hurt so bad I couldn't get back to sleep. So I went to my studio, and I pulled out the birth certificate, and I started Googling names, and I was able to track down my grandmother, and I found out that my mother actually died from cancer. So my sister and I went our whole lives never having a relationship with our mother, because my dad didn't want that to happen, and he never gave up the information, and he was very secretive his whole life here in America. He was always changing the name of his business and always changing his name, and he had so many different aliases and nicknames, but I forgive him for that. And as kids, when the relationship didn't work out with my father and Roxanne. He left and came to Columbus. So my half brother Chaz was raised just by his mother, and when my dad came to Columbus, he was still working in Florida. So he would pay babysitters to babysit me and my sister, but they wouldn't always be able to babysit us together. So we got split up into different homes and apartments, and she was molested. And I actually remember one time her and I were both molested. The female babysitter molested me, and her boyfriend molested my sister. And I remember my sister ran and hid under the bed, and the guy went and chased her and went under the bed and tried to molest her under the bed. And I ran and hid in the closet, and the lady ran into the closet and started molesting me. So we had a rough childhood. We had to fend for ourselves at an early age. We always had to find ways to eat and feed ourselves, and it was just a very rough life. We actually didn't have a family structure until my dad met a lady named Brenda, and he had 2 sons with her, Gino and Nikolai. So we had a family structure for a few years, but that all fell apart. I felt like it was because I was given the Ouija board and I started playing with that, and a lot of demonic and negative things started happening in our household. My dad opened a refrigerator one time and seen this shadow turn into a demon. There's other experiences that my sister had there, and I had an experience where this was after the whole family had split up and moved out of the house. My dad was just using the house as storage, so there was no electricity or water. And I had moved out when I was 16, and my sister did too. And Brenda and her 2 kids, they had left a while ago, and my dad was staying with some girl that he was dating. But I was at the house, and the karaoke machine turned on. With the karaoke machine, you could record music on it, and it turned on, and I heard Satan speaking to me. I thought it was a radio, but that karaoke machine actually didn't have a radio. It just had the ability just to record and play cassette tapes. And so when it turned on, I seen the light turn on, and I heard Satan talking to me. And he told me that I would be a famous rapper. A few years later, I met a guy named Misery, and he introduced me to Busy Bone. And when I met Busy Bone, I found out he was like a devil worshiper, and his foster brother actually got murdered, and it was an unsolved mystery. And I don't want to get too deep into it. I got so much I could say because I just been through so many things in life, but I didn't know nothing about blood sacrifices or the Illuminati or anything like that. And even a few years ago, one of the members in the group that we were in, Seventh Sign, his name was Prince Rasu. We called him Ru Gotti. His real name was Jerron Ben Rasu Thomas. He was actually beat to death by the Columbus Police Department in front of Josiah's house, and Josiah was his brother. And so yeah, that was actually worse than the George Floyd situation, because they brutally beat him to death. And they protested and marched downtown, and the Columbus police officers were like going like this, like boo hoo hoo, and very heartless and cold-hearted, and they didn't care. But needless to say, just from that experience, and even working in the movie industry and being an actor, signed to Camp Talent out here in Columbus, Ohio, I just began to do a lot of research and just went through like a great awakening, and just really realized that we definitely don't wrestle with flesh, but we wrestle with principalities and dark forces. And so at this point in my life, I'm a disciple of Christ, and I take my walk with him very seriously, and obedience is key. No drugs, no fornication, no cussing, just no listening to secular music or watching secular TV. You have to be very disciplined in this Christian lifestyle, and fasting and prayer is key. And I'm on fire for God because he pursued me, and he saved my life, and he never abandoned me. He was always there for me. And it's just been a long journey, but it's been a great experience. And I'll definitely be posting more videos. And you can reach out to me through my website, moreisrequired.com. I came up with that name because the more you know, the more is required. And as disciples of Christ, you know, we do have assignments and a mission here. And we want to win souls for the kingdom because we don't want anybody to go to hell. And so I just recommend staying close to Jesus, especially now in these dark times. God bless you in Jesus' name.